1. With Christmas rolling around and various stores offering fresh-cut trees for sale. This story always pops back up in my memory, and it's hard not to laugh as I write it. Hopefully, this case of malicious compliance will have you smiling as much as the memory of it makes me smile. So I was working as a head cashier, basically low-level management for those curious, at one of the big box stores. It was December, some weeks before Christmas, and tree sales were on offer. It was approaching our closing, and as was per the policy for that store, once night fell, we'd close out our garden center. Any purchases, trees included, had to go through the front. Now, since the garden center area was closed already, this meant there were no cashiers on hand. Cashiers being the people who were in charge of loading up the trees for customers. About 15 minutes or so before the store locks the doors, this lady, whom I'll call Clueless, wheels into the store and rushes up to the garden center area, rattling the chain-link gates. This prompts one of the floor guys to direct her up front. Clueless needs a tree, like right now. The way she was acting, you'd have thought there was a golden ticket or something in that tree. Or it was announced that live Christmas trees were a limited source and there was only 1 or 2 left in the world. Johnny, the manager, who was closing that day, dutifully rings Clueless up, and he then turns to me. "Mind helping me with loading this tree?" Johnny didn't need the help, but he was the kind of manager who recognized when someone needed a break from dealing with cashiers. "I love you guys, but sometimes you're as bad as the customers." For a few minutes. I nod and tell the other head cashier that I was heading off to help with the tree, and to call me over my company phone if I was needed for, well, anything really. We head out, and the lady had already picked a particular tree she wanted, one of the largest we had. Johnny and I do the usual deal of trim the tree's base with a chainsaw, wrap the tree in this funky netting that did nothing to really stop you losing needles from it, and then instruct the customer to bring her car over and we'd put it on the roof. Customer does this, and that's where the fun begins. Johnny and I could do nothing right. It didn't matter how we suggested tying the tree to the roof rack of this customer's car. It wasn't good enough. Eventually, we get the customer to agree to a compromise. She rolls down the windows on the passenger side of her car, and we loop the nylon tie-down rope around the door and post, cinch it tight, and let her roll the windows back up. Then we headed to the other side of her car and stood there trying to sort out the best way to finish the tie-down job.
"Just tie it like you did the other side."
"It's not a good idea," says Johnny.
"I don't care, you haven't done anything right, and I need to get home now."
Yeah, he's..."
"The customer is always right, now do what I said."
Johnny looks at me, I look at him, and we shrug. So the lady rolls down the driver's side windows and we start tying the tree down. The customer chimes in at this point, saying,
"And make sure it's tight, I don't want this tree coming off."
Okay then, tight it is. We pull that rope so tight it was bordering on denting the door of her car, cinch everything down, and put one hell of a knot to keep everything together. My old Boy Scout leader would have been proud. The customer seems satisfied, rolls up her car windows, and drives off. Johnny and I are watching as she heads up the lot. I look over at him and ask, "How long do you think it'll take her to realize that the way we tied that, she can't get out of her car now?" Johnny just shrugs. "Customer is always right, remember?" he says with a dopey smile, and we head back in to do final closing. So for those that don't get it, we didn't tie it around the doorpost, we tied it around the closed doors through the window, tight enough that neither the driver's side nor passenger side doors could be opened. There is something of an epilogue to the story, so the next day, I'm doing my thing when I see Johnny and Clyde, the store manager, talking about something. Clyde is laughing so hard he has tears streaming down his face. Johnny sees me and waves me over. That's where I get the rest of the story. The lady had called our corporate complaints line to complain about how 2 idiots at our store had trapped her in her car when they tied a Christmas tree to the roof of it. She didn't get their names and thought it was something like Trevor and Sam or something. She had to call the fire department to come out and extricate her from the vehicle, and she was pissed, royally pissed. She wanted those 2 fired for what they had done. The report came down to Clyde, who had no clue what was going on, much less who the hell these two employees were, as there wasn't anyone who worked at this store named anything like that. Corporate had just chucked it up to an irate customer, think Karen, and told him not to worry about it. He was talking with Johnny about the weird complaint. When Johnny had relayed the story of what had really happened, I was called over to act as his witness. Clyde was beside himself. His laughter at this lady's stupidity was such, every so often, whenever he heard a call for someone to come help with the Christmas tree sale, he'd burst into fits of laughter or giggles. No punishment came from that, as he figured that, well, we'd done exactly what the lady wanted, and had tried to warn her that it wasn't a good idea. I would see the lady in the store from time to time after that, and she made a point to not look at me, or scuttle off to another aisle. I suspect someone told her just how stupid she'd been. That, or she was afraid I'd trap her in her car again. 2. Around 10 years ago, I was on business in a mid-sized city in the U.S. Midwest, where I happened to have a few friends from earlier in my life. I took a friend Jay out to an Irish pub for some drinks. This pub isn't downtown, but it's in kind of a hip, upscale outdoor shopping area that is known for containing upper-middle-class douchebags, and the stores they frequent. Note that Jay is a woman and I'm a guy, and we are just friends. This becomes important. We sat at the bar. Next to us was a man with a girl on either side of him. They were very hot and dressed very revealingly. He was quite drunk, and our seats were not yet warm when he looked at me and said,
"Taking the lady out, huh? I'm celebrating. Let's do a shot."
Then he gave me a business card. Jay and I introduced ourselves to the guy and his companions. Fearing that correcting him on the date night comment will ruin what could be a full night of free booze, we accepted and drank the shot. Big mistake. I turned back to my friend, but my guy kept engaging us, calling my name, talking about how successful he is, asking about my work, etc., etc., etc. It became evident that we were in the presence of one of the douchebags that this area of town is known for. Great. Since he'd just bought us free alcohol, I turned to him and politely asked, "What are we celebrating?" Dude took that as license to reveal his complete douchery at the drop of a hat. First he flashed a wad of cash, then he said,
"I just made a lot of money."
I congratulated him and tried to turn around and spend time with Jay. He would not let it go, kept calling my name, asking me about work, bragging about money, and he had the audacity to say,
"I bought you a drink, so you have to talk with me for a bit."
It was at this point I decided to knock the guy down a few notches, so I turned back around and asked him how he made so much money today. He said,
"I'm a real estate investor."
"Oh, so you sold some inventory?"
"No, I just bought a few more units."
So I said, "Well, then you haven't made any money at all yet, have you? You just expect to. You actually either lost some cash today, and are less liquid than you were this morning, or you increased your debt, and that's about it. You haven't made shit, am I right?" The girls kind of laughed at him, and he sheepishly said,
"Yeah, I guess."
And for the KO, I said, "Also, what does a wad of money have to do with buying real estate? Do you just like flash wads of cash to impress women? Does that work, ever?" Now leave me and my friend alone. Then I took $40 out of my wallet and told the bartender to remove my shots from his tab and keep the change. Well, this made our very drunk new friend very angry. He yelled,
"Fuck you!"
to me and ran out of the bar, trying to escape his tab. Well, this guy didn't think it through because he left his credit card with the bartender. So the bartender, realizing he has a good tipper in front of him, and that he won't leave a short till at the end of the night, just shrugged and we let it be. The female companions, who revealed themselves to be pros, shocker, left. I looked at the now empty seats to see that dipshit also left his laptop bag. We ordered a couple more shots and a couple pints. 10 minutes later, a new patron came in and asked the bartender if he knew there was a man outside pissing all over the door handles. Super gross. Guess who it was? The bartender vaulted the bar and cleared it by a good foot in one of the most casually athletic feats I've ever seen. I didn't even see his hand touch the bar. It was incredible. There's something about pissed-off Irishmen that turns them into superheroes. Anyway, the bartender grabbed the laptop bag, took it outside, and started beating the crap out of Mr. Real Estate with it. Then, after the pissing stopped, the bartender threw the bag into the street. Our mogul grabbed his laptop, got into his car, did a burnout around the corner, and yelled "F you" out his window to all of us. Unfortunately, a police car was parked at the intersection. The cop turned on his lights and, without moving more than 10 feet, pulled this guy over and gave him a DUI. This guy literally got a DUI in the crosswalk of the intersection he burned out around. So we laughed, pointed, and ridiculed him because we are considerate. Now, this particular city had, or has, really strict DUI laws, and they wouldn't release you until you went in front of a judge, which couldn't happen until you dried out for 24 hours. Note that this event happened on a Thursday night, which meant Bro was now staying in the drunk tank until Monday late morning at the earliest. So I did what any petty human would. I gave his work and mobile numbers from his business card to all my friends and told them what happened. One of them put it on CL, and within a half hour this guy's work voicemail and mobile voicemail were full of prank calls. Fake lawyers, fake priests, fake escorts, you name it, they blanketed him. I finished the night with Jay, gave her a hug goodbye, went to my hotel, slept like a baby, and led a great meeting the next day. It brought me joy that this guy had to get out of the drunk tank, relive his bad decisions, as he filtered through voicemail after voicemail of prank calls, telling him what a shit person he was. 3. Around late 2016, early 2017, I had returned home to south of England from university to stay with my parents while I figured out what on earth I was going to do with my life. I worked a crap retail job, while surrounded by lovely people for a few months to clear my student overdraft, which I so willingly maxed out at uni. I really wanted out and to find a job where I could start an actual career. In steps one particularly nasty sales, potentially multi-level marketing scam group that rhymes with BureauCorp, who advertised a marketing role online, which I eagerly applied for. Within a day or two, I received a response and an interview invitation for their office in central London, which total travel time for me was roughly an hour and 10-15 minutes or so. I was pretty hyped. Catching the train into Waterloo, I was excited at the potential of getting this first career-making role, and spent the entire train journey, tube ride, and walk through central London, excited what life could be like in a few months or years. Their office was in a beautiful green area of London, which only bolstered my optimism. But then I reached the office itself. I'd like you to imagine you've gone to a walk-in GP and stood in the waiting room. It's really fucking busy. You're struggling to find a single empty chair. It's that situation, except there are possibly 60 or 70. It's been a long time, so my memory may be exaggerating this number. People all in interview outfits ranging from suits to jeans, and 8 months in a closet pile of creased white shirts. I don't question it too much, as I think the job sounded great, and I just wanted to impress the interviewer. I get called into this man's office. He seems nice enough, but has a really slimy air about him. He starts saying the most amazing things about the role and the company. How I'd be earning about $36,000 in 2 years. How I'd be working as a manager soon because it's just so easy to progress here. In my desperation to start my career, I ate it all up. I left that interview feeling pretty good about myself and headed home. Within an hour on my journey home, I get an email from a woman inviting me for an interview. A first interview. I responded a bit confused, as I had just had my first interview, and her response was essentially, "Oh well, why don't you come in for your second interview tomorrow then?" An interview starting at 8 or 9 a.m. Her willingness to offer me a second interview, seemingly without any knowledge of my first chat with the manager, concerned me, but again, I hated retail, so I was all in. I rocked up again the next day, surprised to see that the front room is full once more, with a variety of applicants, and I'm getting increasingly uncomfortable by the minute. Once again, smarmy manager invites me into his office, and I explain to him that I was under the assumption that this was an office job. "Oh yeah, absolutely is, but there's the occasional bit of outside work you have to complete here." He then introduces me to someone a few years older than me, young Indian guy in his mid-20s all dressed up. The manager explained to me that I'd be spending some time with this marketer to prove my worth to the company. The next thing he said, "I'll see you tonight." Tonight? "I'll see when you guys get back about 8:30, 9-ish, and then we can talk about how you performed today." I'm a bit shell-shocked by this because it's about 9:30 in the morning, and I'm expected to spend 11 hours with this stranger as part of this very shifty job interview. In my somewhat confused state, I blindly follow this also very slimy individual as he's lecturing me on sales and leading me to the London Underground. He tells me we're catching the tube somewhere further down the line in Zone 1 or 2. Of course, he expects me to pay my own ticket because, screw me, right? I ask him about the plan for the day, and he tells me about how he'll be assessing my sales technique on the street and how I need to prove I have what it takes to be a hero. While this guy is lecturing me and telling me all about how he was going to be a doctor, but leaving med school to work at this company was the greatest thing he ever did, I'm sat there realizing, for which I should have realized way sooner, that all this awful company is doing is speeding people through their conveyor belt application process to get a whole day of free labor from them, where they'll be expected to spend 10 to 11 hours marketing bullshit products on the streets. I'm seething. I'm mad at myself for buying into this ridiculous facade. I'm mad at the manager for filling my head with absolute nonsense for the past 2 days. And I'm mad at this smug prick who's rudely lecturing me on the tube about marketing. To fill our journey, he's telling me to pull out my notepad and start listening to the most important aspects of sales. Lecturing me on how he's my boss for today, and that if he says jump, I need to say how high. He occasionally, arrogantly, reminds me that if I don't impress him at any point today, the manager is sure to hear about it tonight. I am a pretty passive person, pretty agreeable, and, at least in the past, would have gone quite far along with situations I dislike to avoid awkwardness. But at this point, there's no fucking way I'm doing anything for these people, let alone attempting to sell a shitty product for them for 11 hours. My eyes have glazed over while he was talking, and we reached a stop, because he showed clear agitation and raised his voice a bit at me for not hanging on his every word. Seeing the tube doors shut, I decided what I was going to do. I engaged really heavily with him. I acted so invested in everything he was saying for the next 2 or 3 minutes, and the moment those doors opened again, I scripted this scene in my head, like I had seen someone from my past outside that I hadn't seen in many years. I stood up dramatically and said, "Is that?" Was almost a doctor said.
"What are you doing? Sit down."
"Wait, is that?" Then I got up and just off the tube, hearing him shout, "Get back here!" from his seat. I spent the rest of the day walking around London questioning my life decisions. The manager emailed me asking what happened, and I told him that the smarmy train guy had lost me on the tube. Naturally, I received another email asking me to go attend a first interview. 4. So about 10 years ago, I, a 35-year-old male now, became a CNA, a certified nurse's aide, and worked at assisted living. In many of these types of buildings, corporate does not want the nursing home, so they make their nurses and CNAs wear business casual clothes. The place I was at required us to wear a collared shirt and khakis or black pants. Now, I am a 6'3" male on the skinnier side that has been told my legs are so long I look like I'm walking on stilts. That being said, finding khakis isn't easy, and I usually need to custom order them, which can be pricey. Also, I'd like to note that this building had hard carpet everywhere, and I would end up kneeling down to help tie shoes or do other things while helping out my residents, and ended up blowing out the knees on my khakis often. On to the malicious compliance. One day, management says that we are allowed to wear appropriate yoga pants that were black or khaki colored, with no reason given. This does nothing to help me in my holy khaki situation, and as I was making $12 an hour, custom-ordered pants were very expensive to me. So I decided I was going to buy black and khaki scrub pants, because they're cheaper and more durable. I go on wearing them for about a week without issue when management calls me in and states that the policy is no scrub pants, and that I would be written up if I do it again. I tried to explain the financial situation, that each pair of khakis were costing me most of a day's wage, and the knees would wear out quick. They respond that it was tough, and no scrubs. I then grab the flyer they posted about yoga pants, and start to make the case that if women are allowed to wear yoga pants, which are much cheaper, I should be able to wear scrubs. Again, they say, "No, it's not the same." At this point, I look down and see the wording on the flyer is, "As a thank you for your hard work, management has decided to allow all nursing staff to wear appropriate yoga pants if they would like. No gender noted, just that they must be black or khaki, and not low-cut." Cue the malicious compliance. I go home and tell my girlfriend at the time about this and ask her for a pair of her black yoga pants. Just an FYI, she was barely 5'3", and when I tried them on, they barely went past my knees. They covered my butt though, so they worked. The next day I went into work proudly sporting the high-water yoga pants with my hairy calves, stilt-like legs, and black juicy lettering on my butt. I made sure to tuck in my shirt so everyone could revel in my glorious bony ass. 1 hour into my shift, when management gets there, I instantly get called into the office with my boss and HR. "Nelb 13, what are you doing? You are not wearing the correct uniform, and we will need to send you home now." I grab the flyer and point out that nowhere did they ever say that this was only for women to wear, and they also don't say anything about length on it. I then say that they are the appropriate height, put my hands on my hips, do a 180 to show off, and smile at them looking over my shoulder. "That's not the point, Nelb 13. You know what we meant." "Actually, that is the point. He's right," says HR. "You did say nursing staff could wear these, and they fit the criteria you put in place." Boss has a wicked scowl on her face knowing she got beat, but then pauses and laughs. "Okay, fine, wear your scrubs, just no more yoga pants. I've already heard the female residents talking about your juicy butt more than I'd like. Go home and change, though." For a long time, I got teased by a bunch of 85-year-old women about when I was going to be showing off my juicy butt and legs again, but at least I got to wear scrubs. 5. I recently moved into a new apartment. In getting things set up beforehand, the building manager told me most of the tenants get along and are openly friendly, but that some have issues that they deal with in a very loud way. It seemed a kind gesture to give a heads up there might be some unpleasantness. No worries. I met most of the neighbors right away and thought it was astounding how bonded they were, especially when compared to my last neighbors. This place was a dream. Several of them were up front which unit was the bad apple, and the things they had to endure, such as screaming, pretending she was being beaten, drugs, strange men, it's a secure building, and supposed animal abuse. Because these incidents usually happened outside city quiet hours, she would ignore the police when they responded to calls from the other tenants, or would scream through the closed door that she was okay and didn't need help. So there isn't much the police can do about her disruptive behavior. They can only advise we contact the landlord and building manager after each incident until there's enough complaints to be able to convict her. I didn't move in with much, so the apartment was largely empty, and sound carried quite a bit. The unit I moved into was also unoccupied for several months before I moved in, so at first I could understand her frustration with new sounds, but I wasn't going to be silenced by some snatch stomping on my ceiling because there's kids over. One of my friends who visited at first had little ones and was also a survivor of abuse, so the sudden angry stomping would trigger her anxiety when she came over. I did try talking to the neighbor about 2 weeks after moving in. She and I are both reclusive, communication was through the manager, but she started screaming through the door about how she has a right to peace in her home and throwing herself around her apartment immediately without listening to me speak at all. The next weekend, I got my things from my storage unit and was wonderfully happy to find my subwoofer. I like loud music and heavy bass, and not having to listen to mentally ill control freak psychopaths who think they have the authority to silence me by stomping. She woke me up the next morning with her crazy, so I decided to be a nice neighbor and allow her to heal in her own way by playing my music loud enough to cover her thrashing and top of her lungs screaming. The best part of the day was Doja Cat, Boss Bitch, The neighbor stomped and punched the floor several times in quick succession, which was followed by a nearly identical bass beat. I could hear her screaming on the phone with the building manager about my music. I felt so sorry for the manager, making all kinds of threats to report me to all kinds of agencies, and it made me smile that much more. Sadly, my sub was already on its way out, but it survived for another couple of weeks of grand concerts. She's been quiet for a few weeks, but has started up with the stomping again when she hears me in my apartment. Time for a new sub. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 205. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Please do hit the like button before you go, thank you kindly. Okay, let's see, let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, what is your favorite quote, be it from a book, movie, song, TV show, whatever else? Now, I don't really do one and all favorites, but there are a few I do enjoy, and this has been one of them for a very long time. It's by Douglas Adams and comes from the book The Restaurant at the End of the Universe. In the beginning, the universe was created. This has made a lot of people very angry, and widely been regarded as a bad move. I look forward to seeing some of yours in a comment below. Thank you kindly. And with that, I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.